Very happy to welcome you. Yes, I'm very happy to welcome you all to the seventh online seminar from the project of the Department of International Relations in our University Higher School of Economics, the International Laboratory on World Order Studies, and the new Regionalism, and also the Bulgarian Club in our university, the European Integration, an Eastern European aspect that is supervised by Professor Alexander Lukin, where in few lectures we'll try to present the most common and pressing issues of the European Union. My name is Stefan Stoyanov, and I'm the vice chairman of the Bulgarian Club. And today I'm going to be your host. Um, I'm very happy because today our topic is one of our favorites. We're going to talk about the Balkans, about the European Union. And today I remembered that a year ago, we actually had a seminar on a similar topic with Vesela Cherneva. She is currently our Prime Minister's advisor on foreign policy. But if we look at the Balkans now and a year ago, well, pretty much nothing has changed, except perhaps the tension in Bosnia and Herzegovina or in Montenegro, but I'm sure that we're going to talk about it. And one of the brightest, I would say, moments of the Bulgarian presidency of the Council of the European Union in 2018 was that we managed to engage Europe much more with the Western Balkans and their future membership. But for 4 years, later, unfortunately, we cannot see any progress. And today we have invited two very special guests who are going to help us to understand what's actually happening on our favorite peninsula. And I'm pretty sure that the focus on today's seminar is going to be on Serbia, because we have a guest from Serbia, Professor Babic, and a guest that knows pretty much everything about Serbia, Professor Entina. Professor Blagoje Babic graduated from the Faculty of Law of the University of Belgrade and a PhD degree in economics at the University of Sarajevo. He worked at the Institute of International Politics and Economics in Belgrade as head of the Center for World Economy and later deputy director. He taught as a full professor at Moscow University, universities in Novi Sad, Subotica, Sarajevo, and Belgrade. He was founder and editor-in-chief of the Review of World Economy and European Legislation. He also published 25 books and about 250 papers, including several papers in foreign languages as French, Russian, English, Hungarian, and Chinese. And Professor Entina, Ekaterina Entina, that we all very well know, is a professor in the Department of Regional Studies and director of the Center for Mediterranean Studies at the Higher School of Economics, and also head of the Department of Black Sea and Mediterranean Studies at the Institute of Europe at the Russian Academy of Science. And I would also want to say that she is actually the mother of our club, and we are very grateful for everything that she has done for us. Now, I'm giving the floor to Professor Lukin, who wants to say several words before we start.
Yes, first of all, there's a technical thing because we cannot see Professor Babic's screen. I've just sent to you, Stefan, his presentation, PPT. Maybe you can show it for him.
Just a moment.
And then he'll tell you when to change the slide.
Okay.
Okay. Did you receive it?
Yes, I received it. Now I'm going to.
Okay. And second, I just wanted to tell you how excited I am to see Professor. Well, I cannot see him, unfortunately, but to listen to Professor Babic today, because I'll tell you the story how I met him. I first met him in 1999. I think it was 9th of May, because at that time we met in Belgrade, and Belgrade was bombed, of course, by NATO forces at that time. So I went there. There were no flights, just like in some countries now, and I went from Hungary by minibus, and the people told me that you better choose the minibus, because if you go to a big bus, by big bus, which is cheaper, then they can mistake it for a tank and bomb it. So it's much safer to go by a minibus. And at that time, Professor Babic was, I think he was deputy head.
Deputy director.
Deputy director of the
institute.
famous and most important think tank in Belgrade. At that time, it was Yugoslavia, the Institute of International Economics and Politics. And I gave a lecture there. So I have some sentimental feelings about that time. From after that, we cooperated on several occasions. I published a Russian translation of Professor Babic's article, quite a lengthy and interesting article on the Japanese economic kind of model. So he studies quite a lot of things, but I think, of course, his main expertise is the Balkans. So he's going to tell us about the Western, whatever is called Western Balkans now. We just called it Balkans before. I don't know if there are Eastern Balkans. I'm not quite sure. I think Western Balkans is a region without, but at the same time, there's no Eastern or Southern or Northern Balkans, just Western Balkans. But anyway, what is Bulgaria, by the way? Is it also Western Balkans?
Oh, we are the European Union. And actually, if I'm not mistaken, this term Western Balkans, it was invented in Bulgaria during our presidency in 2018. But I'm sure that Ekaterina is going to say.
Well, it's a great joke, Alexander Vladimirovich, because it's a pure technical term. Pure technical notion, Western Balkans. It does not have any connection anytime with
just not to call it like, just not to say former Yugoslavia or something like that.
Just not to say former Yugoslavia. Even we have, let's say, more interesting joke, because when country leaves Balkan space and becomes a part of the European Union, it is no more Balkan state, and that's why we Balkanists call not Western Balkans but Western Balkans, like those who rest.
Okay, never mind. So it's my pleasure to give the floor to Professor Babic. Thank you very much.
Professor Lukin, thank you for having honored me to invite me here and to give me the floor. But to consolate you, as I am not so beautiful, you are losing nothing not to see me. So you see, the French say, if we have to begin, let us to begin from the beginning. Therefore, we have to define main oceans, Balkan and Western Balkan. Usually, as Balkan is named the region comprising former Yugoslavia, Albania, Bulgaria, and Romania. The Balkan is stigmatized as European powder keg. This label is invented during the first part of 20th century, preceding the World War II. Reason is the overlapping claims to the territories and the spheres of influence of major European powers. The second reason is that the liberation movements have had as a result the formation of new states, Greece, Serbia, Montenegro, Bulgaria, Romania, and Albania. The formation of new states normally was accompanied by the friction. The main problem will be delimitation of frontiers. Outside of Balkan, there has been strong propensity to deepen this friction. Deeper this friction, easier to manipulate those people to push them against each other in relying on the leverage divide and impera. Disparaging notions, Balkanized and Balkanization, both are from 1920. The Balkanized means to divide into small and mutually hostile groups. Arnold Toynbee believes that we owe this label to German socialists describing the results of Treaty of Brest-Litovsk. In the region, there are part of political elites considering that their countries do not belong to Balkan. There are in all countries of Balkan some people who do not feel happy to be labeled as Balkanians. The parts of this elite of Balkanian peoples would like to escape the Balkan. Usually this has been explained as a complex of inferiority of being considered Balkanian. Speeding up this complex has been aimed at separate psychologically the Balkanians from Balkan, offering them Europeanization. This warfare is disastrously successful. The Euromania is rooted deeply within Balkans. Deeper the Euromania, larger the possibility of so-called Europeans to interfere into the Balkan and to push the Balkanians against each other. There are many reasons why Balkanians should be proud of belonging to Balkan. Geographically, Balkan has great privileges. It is one of the nicest parts of the continent. It descends to 4 seas, Adriatic, Ionian, Aegean, and Black Sea. He has a picturesque landscape, comprised high mountain and large plains with favorable climate. Historically, the Balkan is the core of Europe. The name Europe originates from Greece. The first region that was labeled as Europe was the plain around Athens. During the Roman rule, the present Greek province Thracia was labeled Europa. Afterwards, this notion has been being protracted to at first to the east, then to north, and finally to the west of Europe. Spiritually, Greece, namely Balkans, is the cradle of so-called European civilization. The Christianism came to Rome after having been reformed by Greek philosophers during the Ptolemaic period, building in the Greek dialectic and converting it from a codex of rules into a philosophical system. Crux of the problem. Now we came to the most puzzling questions. What really is behind the complex of inferiority between quotation marks of Balkanians? I found the answer in a splendid book, Europe Today, of Serbian historian Blagoje Babic. The complex of inferiority of Balkanians stems from their historical destiny. Even in the 19th century, reigned the postulate that international law is applicable only to the part of the world designed as Europe. The rest of the world was treated as a realm of free hunting, namely being predestined for converting into the colonies of European countries. Being for centuries under rule of the Asian occupier Turkey, the Balkan was treated as belonging to Asia, therefore a part of the free hunting area. The thin elites of newly liberated Balkan countries, afraid of being colonized, precipitated to escape the hunting area. Unique solution was to be Europeanized. So emerges the question how the core of Europe could be Europeanized. One measure was to send young people to various schools in many European countries, Petrograd, Prague, Wien, Berlin, Geneva, Paris, London, and others. Then all Balkan countries proceeded to imitate various institutions of more fortunate European countries, all considered to be sufficiently Europeanized to escape the realm of free hunting. But the destiny was not a lie of Balkan countries. In one or another way, they remained in danger of being colonized. The drive of colonization became permanent. The best evidence is the destruction of Yugoslavia and instigated of civil wars among her former republics. Instead of strong multi-ethnic and multi-confessional state, we got a crowd of protectorates, economic invalids. The endeavor to undermine the stabilization of process, foreign influence constantly instigate the conflict among them. This is the case especially in the space called Western Balkans. The Serbian French geographer Jovan Cvijić summarized the destiny of Balkans in one sentence. The geography is the highest enemy of Balkan. Now the EU policy to Western Balkan. The European Union awarded Balkan with one more step in Balkanization. She added new division of the peninsula. At first, she enlarged the membership, receiving Greece, Bulgaria, Romania, Slovenia, and Croatia. For the rest of the region, she invented the North and Western Balkan, what is the central part of the Balkan: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia, territories that remain outside the European Union. The territorial integration, the territories in negotiating process for membership in EU are Albania, North Macedonia, Montenegro, and Serbia. By the way, Turkey in the same status. The marathon of the membership of Turkey began 1967. The territories labeled as potential candidates are Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. The waiting room for membership of the territories of Western Balkans in the Central European is the Central European Trade Agreement, CEFTA. The member of this CEFTA here are territories: Albania, Bosnia and Herzegovina, Kosovo, Montenegro, North Macedonia, and Serbia. The membership in CEFTA is conceived as training for the membership in the EU. The European Union, for one meeting to another, reiterates the importance of including the Western Balkans into EU. On her final tour in Western Balkans, German Chancellor Angela Merkel referred to the region as integration to be a geostrategic importance. Ursula von der Leyen stated that EU is not complete without the Western Balkans. But the same former German Chancellor Angela Merkel said she doesn't support the creating a firm timeline to open talks, namely they always invent some reason to postpone this process of integration. The main hurdle for Montenegro is between quotation marks, corruption and organized crime. The sin of Serbia is growing proximity with China and Russia. The European Union has could ultimate result in triumph of Beijing and Moscow, which would lure to region by enticing infrastructural growth and growing process of energy security. The EU strategy toward the region would require vigorous pushback against the Russian and Chinese intrusion, coupled with sustaining economic and political reforms. The postponing to fulfilling the promises to including Balkan into European Union, Brussels bureaucracy is trying to limit cooperation with other parts of the world. It blames the Western countries of permitting the presence of foreign powers in Balkan, meaning Russia, China, and Turkey. They have made their inroads in the region, and the lack of integration policies by EU has widened the scope for foreign powers to flex their mandate in his geostrategic region. The Chinese expansion in Central in Eastern Europe via the group 16+1 initiative has already resulted in growing footprint of you in Europe's doorstep. But what is in essence, the Brussels bureaucracy would like to take ad infinitum the Western Balkans in the waiting room, but without relations with foreign powers, namely Russia and China. So for the Brussels bureaucracy, the Western Balkan has to remain terra nullius, to the land of nobodies. Now some word on economic landscape. The total population of Western Balkan is only 18 millions. This is a narrow market, but it is at the same time shallow, because this is poorer part of the continent with a relatively very low income per head. But you see, statistics are so that everybody can find what if he wants to prove that Western Balkans countries are very poor. One has to rely on these estimates based on foreign exchange, and this is nominal. Nominally, they are very low, but if you look to the purchasing power, the parity, these countries, yes, they are poor, but however, this is not the misery. And so you see what is the characteristic of the external economic relations is that Western Balkans is oriented mainly to Western Europe. The region's total trade is 55 milliards euro. The EU was the main partner of Western Balkans for both export 69 and imports 54 in 2020. The manufacturing goods made up some 77% of EU export to and 80% of EU import from the Western Balkans. You see the economic and investment plan of EU for the Western Balkans for 2021 to 2027 identify 10 investment flagships and allocate a substantial financial package of 9 milliards in EU funds with possibility to mobilize 20 more milliards of invested through the Western Balkan guarantee facilities. But we shall see what will happen. Now on initiative Open Balkan, the agreement of Serbia and Albania and North Macedonia is a welcome step in the current geopolitical and geoeconomic reality. The initiative has no rational alternative in the given circumstances. This initiative could be saving solution for the whole Balkan, including countries that are members of EU for multiple reasons, geographic, demographic, economic, and historical ones. The countries of Eastern Europe, including the Balkan countries, thanks to the open market economies, the agreements of integration or agreement of association entered into system of communicating vessels with developed countries of Western Europe. During the last 3 decades, they lost about 25 million people. All Balkan countries have being in constant depopulation, which such demographic outflow for about 5 decades, the autochthon populations would become minorities in all Balkans countries. The majority population would be the immigrants from Asian and African countries destroyed by exporters of democracy. It is possible to interrupt the process of desertification of Balkan countries only in one way, by accelerating development of their economies. But after dismantling of Yugoslavia, no new small state had a sufficiently large and deep market for exploiting the external economies and economies of scale. The production of small series, especially of the product with lower added values, cannot be competitive on the world market where developed countries are price makers. Next reason for headaches of the Balkan countries is that their economies have approximately similar structures. Therefore, they compete each other on the same markets, cutting down their prices to each other. This additionally reduces their competitive capacities. Only a way to cure those pains of Balkan economies could be speeding up the intra-regional division of labor. The commonplace is you can choose your friends, but the God gave you your neighbors. Everything has a price, including the neglect of the God's will. Balkan countries cannot expect Balkan, they have to strive for their destiny only on it. Traditionally, main trade partner of Balkan countries has been being outside of Balkan. Four of them, main trade partner is EU. This trade has the form of the hub and spikes. The Balkan countries compete for the same EU market, remaining weak partners to each other. This has been having unfortunate consequences for their mutual political relations, namely the countries that do not trade among themselves. They are not necessary to each other. That is why they are not capable to resolve their frontier and other litigations. The historical experience teaches us that the trade is the best remedy for all disagreement between the neighbors. The best evidence are the resolving of the territorial litigations between France and Italy and between the France and Germany. The trade had made necessary to each other and the frontiers became non-existent. In a nutshell, very important factors are supporting the realization of the initiative of Open Balkans for all Balkan countries, not only for the countries of Western Balkans. Of course, in the given geopolitical relations of forces in the world, the Balkan countries are not sufficiently independent in decision-making. Their mutual relations will depend on big powers, but they may not forget that the Almighty implemented them on Balkans. What is needed to realize the Balkans' potential for sound development is an autonomous external environment that is to be created by the Balkans themselves through the general plan Balkan reconciliation, checking out the foreign interference and enabling Balkans to establish a new type of relationship with their neighbors. It is true that at present the Balkans are not in a hurry to save themselves, but there is a hope that, however, they are getting aware that protector will not resolve their problems. In any case, instead to blame their bad destiny, the Balkans should finally take their destiny in their own hands. Instead to complain against the foreign interference, the Balkans should remember their own folklorist interpretation. If somebody deceives you one time, God punish him. If somebody deceives you 2 times, God punish both. If somebody deceives you 3 times, God punishing only you. So every Balkan countries had to strive for itself and for its neighbors, never forgetting the message of great antique Greek philosopher Socrates: freedom is for those that are capable to conquer it. Now, fallouts from European environment. Everything that happens in the European continent has fallouts on Balkans, usually negative ones. The two worlds on one continent. The principal source of troubles of Balkan peoples is the violence biased external environment. The two traditions have been persisting in Europe. To the present terminology, one is the civil society, sometimes flourishing in the antique Greece, and second, the military society at the antique Roma. The Greeks were biased to develop the philosophy, the science and arts. They had invented the mechanical computer to calculate the distances between the celestial bodies. The antique Romans instead were biased to perfection of their swords. The victory of the antique Roma over antique Greece meant the victory of the military society over the civil society. Hence, the military scale of values has impregnated the European mentality. The most outstanding symbols of the belligerents, the sword, the lion, and the eagle, became and persisted as synonymous of the greatness and glory. The Roman juridical system for centuries had two distinct legal orders, the jus civile and jus gentium. The former was reserved for the cives, the free citizens of Roma. All other citizens of the Roma state had to obey to jus gentium. So, de jure, the citizens of Roma state were divided into two categories, cives and gentes. This explains at last in part why the Europe is the cradle of the jingoism of all kinds. In conformity with the inherited Roman juridical tradition, the categorization of people persisted. Even in 19th century was in vigor the conception that international law is reserved for those that are recognized as Europe, namely civitas Romana. The rest of the world considered the area of free hunting. Therefore, all peoples outside of Europe, gentes, were to be colonized. And now a word on Slavic pareidolia. The Slavs cannot do either with or without the West. The Slavic world and the Latin Germanic West are connected by the pan-European spiritual heritage of the Hellenic and Roman cultures and Christianity. The Slavic world has for long perceived the ties with the West as the guarantee of its future. The West has always inspired to subdue the Slavic world. The Slavic world, the Slavic world savages the West from its own salvages for evolution. The West has constantly strived to impose on it its own institution. A conflict with the West is the last thing that the Slavs need. The last thing that they may expect of the West is a voluntary accept of amicable contest. Nowadays, it is quite clear that the whole West is united in the desire to convert all Slavs into slaves. That is why the genuine agreement between them has been impossible. It must be clear, even at the last Slav dupe, that the Slavs can be saved only together. Dwarfing of Europe. Europe, you see, has been the center of the world for a long time. According to the Arnold Toynbee, European civilization is unique, becoming worldwide. 6 of 8 big powers, Great Britain, France, Germany, Austria, Hungary, Italy, and Russia, were European. Outside of Europe, only Japan and the United States. 2 world wars, the most devastating in history, were waged on the European soil, deprived Europe of its privileged role in the world. To Toynbee, the consequences is the dwarfing of Europe, namely of Western Europe. Firstly, Western European powers lost their colonial empires, and secondly, the world was divided into 2 blocks, East and West. The world's top powers became United States and Soviet Union. Western Europe found itself in their shadow. Moreover, the United States of America established an official custody on the Western Europe. The Western Europe was no longer an autonomous factor in the world politics. The dwarfing of Europe reached zenith in our time. The EU is an economic giant, but has become a political dwarf. Using NATO Pact, USA succeeded to convert it into protectorate. In Western Europe, Europe is incapable to resist the arbitrary behavior of its overseas descendant and dissident USA. The fallout for Balkans are dangerous. The Western policy toward Balkans became unipolar. There is no equilibrium of forces. Exhaustion of great ideas nursery. Since the founding of the Greece first polis, Europe has become a producer of great ideas that have shaped the whole world. The ancient Greek discovered the cause-consequence sequence that opening the door for development of natural sciences. Christianity was returned the dignity to physical work, crux et labore, and moved Europe out of economic stalemate after the exhaustion of the slave-holding mode of production. In medieval Italian cities republic, European type of development is discovered, whose basic characteristic is skill of converting surplus product into capital, that is capital accumulation. Discovery of old Greece science opened the door to the technical invention leading to the founding of the manufacturing industry. From the synthesis of this kind of discoveries stemmed the industrial evolution born in England. That's how Europe regenerated the whole world economy. Anti-Greece invented democracy. Ancient Rome invented law and state building. Byzantium presented and aggregated the civilization of the entire ancient world, including the codification of Roman law. The Renaissance in medieval Italy, by appropriating the acquisition of Byzantium, has determined the further development of European civilization. The French Revolution, erecting the flag, freedom, equality, brotherhood, liberté, égalité, fraternité, open up a stream of the far-reaching social transformation that have set the tone for the new social movements around the world. The October Revolution in Russia aroused hope in creating an equality society. In response to Soviet real socialism, the Western Europe had been instigating the welfare state that was a synthesis of market economy and principle of social solidarity. In response to the consequences of World War II. In the Western Europe, the idea of uniting Europe was inspired the intention, among other things, to place the war among the unimaginable nouns and to convert into in the space of prosperity. The response to the religious and ethnic frictions was the multiculturalism, but everything has an end. So is with the European great ideas nursery. A spiritual vacuum has been substituted to it. All great European ideas I consumed, unique beams remained and are two utopies, Pan-Slavic association and Pan-Slavic, Pan-Germanic historical reconciliation. The realization would convert the whole space between Atlantic and Pacific into an era of permanent peace and prosperity. And now, ladies and gentlemen, I hope that all listeners survived my introduction. I am equally highly thankful for your attention and your patience. Let me to express my special gratitude to worldwide known expert for international relations, Professor Alexander Vladimirovich, for having honored me by introducing me, inviting me into this seminar. I found me additionally pleased and honored by sharing the introduction with another outstanding Russian scholar that we self-considered ours one, namely Professor Ekaterina Gennadieva Entina. Thanks you all.
Thank you very much, Professor Babic. And now I'm going to present the floor to Professor Entina, and I'm going to stop sharing the screen. Can you turn your micro? Okay.
Okay, Professor Babic, thank you very much for your very interesting, very philosophical and systemic introduction. I suppose that it introduced our listeners with the logic of all, let's say, political, economic value, historical development of Balkans, and explained very much, to a very great extent, why Balkans are there where they are at the moment. As for me, my speech, I hope, despite the fact that my students know that I speak very, very long, I will try to be brief. And my speech will consist of 3 blocks. The first block, we can call it what does special operation, how does special operation of Russia in Ukraine influence the European integration and the idea of European integration in the Balkans. The second block are the results of general elections in Serbia, which were held last week on April 3rd. And the third block, let's say, probably the most attractive one, whether, in my opinion, Serbia will introduce sanctions on Russia or not. Let's start from the very beginning. How a special operation of Russia in Ukraine influences European integration of Balkans. Tactically, everybody saw that it led to the homogenization of Balkan space in terms, let's say, of belonging to the common foreign policy of the European Union. But it is, of course, a matter of fact, but we can consider it as a tactical change in terms of its European integration, but it's very significant. Why it is significant? Because if we look back and see what was half a year yet, we will see that all Balkan countries, all former Yugoslav countries actually, they just formally joined anti-Russian sanctions of the European Union. If we speak, for example, for two, let's say, the most developed countries of this region, Slovenia and to some extent Croatia, do not take in Serbia in this case because it's, let's say, a separate story. If you take a look on Slovenia and Croatia, we will see that yet half a year ago, Slovenia was one of the most important economic partners of Russia in Southeast Europe. Also in terms of also in terms of sophisticated export and import. If we speak about Croatia, yeah, of course, also it joined to the EU sanctions on Russia from the very beginning. But the same as Slovenia did it on a minimum level from one side. From another side, if we take into account the development of Russian-Croatian economic cooperation, it was quite satisfactory during last decade, and in general terms, it only grew. That means that this space in terms of accepting it as a single value space with Europe, with the rest of the European Union, had some special position. Also in some, let's say, unpredictable countries like Croatia or Slovenia. If we look on it now, we will see that this space in political terms became homogeneous with one exclusion of, let's say, Serbian world of the Balkans, because it is not only about Serbia, but it's also about Serbs in Bosnia and Herzegovina, and to some extent to the part of Serbian community in Montenegro. That tactically it's an interesting phenomenon towards the European Union. The most interesting thing that it was done by Slovenia, Croatia, Montenegro, without any pressure from the side, without any additional pressure from the side of Brussels. If we take into account the idea of European integration itself to the Balkans, it is transformed to a great extent. If we speak about Balkans, it has never been perceived by the European Union as a people of the same blood in terms of values. Balkan people have never been and probably will never be the same people in the perception of the Western Europe, as, for example, for them to some extent were the people of Central and Eastern Europe. To a very, let's say, wide range of reasons, which probably is not necessary to mention here. The process of European integration in the Balkans was and is not about integration of societies, integration of values in the eyes of Brussels, but more about norms, about the creation of single market, about finally the geostrategic security of Europe. Practically, it was tied with the formation of such kind of normative and economic space where the European Union is playing the first violin. The unification of this space, first of all, concerned European Union economic relations with China and Russia in this space. It was especially relevant to the Balkans, where both Russia and China were and are present. What do we have in terms of European and the idea of European integration as a unification of normative and economic space now after a month and a half of, let's say, new world order? We see that if we speak about EU-Russia cooperation or competition normative in the Balkans, it is not relevant anymore. Why? Because sanctions stopped the trade and cooperation as a system between Russia and the European Union. The majority of countries of the regions joined it. And even if we take into account Serbia, who does not join yet, and even if it will not join anyway, it does not change the situation because the normative space which will be and which is created in this space, it's the European Union normative space. And Russia probably now, despite the fact whether Serbia will join or will not join sanctions, Russia will play on the ground of normative space of the European Union here. If we take into account EU-China relations and its cooperation and competition in normative terms in Europe and particularly in the Balkan region, we will see even more complex situation. From one side, China with its project, Belt and Road project, introduced Southeast European space almost 10 years ago, and it faced with the normative legislation of the European Union, and to a great extent accepted it in the activities of its companies and the logics of its project. From another side, which is more important in terms of future development of normative regulation of new economic sphere, I mean technological one, if we take into account all legislation or normative legislation which is concerned about technologies, artificial intellect, and etc., we will see that China is on one, quite more, quite more продвинутый, quite more went ahead the European Union for not only months but probably for years, because it has already its national regulations in terms of the defense of personal data, in terms of intellectual, in terms of artificial intellect, in terms of high IT technologies, and so on. And probably in this space, European Union will face with a situation when it will have to join the national legislation of China. In these terms, it also, let's say, to some extent undermines the idea of European integration in Southeast Europe as an idea of geostrategic, geo-economic, and geo-normative integration. And let's say last point to this block is that we should not forget that Brussels announced the speedy model of integration to the European Union of Ukraine, Moldavia, and the rest of countries which would like to be a part of the European Union, and who was a part of the space of former Soviet Union. Probably, of course, it's let's say just empty talks from the side of Brussels, but if it transforms to some real activities, to some real negotiations, it will be a huge dissatisfaction and diminishing of the idea of European integration in the Balkans, because all of us know that Balkans are waiting for their European integration almost 20 years nowadays. And they do not have any idea when they will be a part, if they will be a part. That's why I suppose that this Russian special operation in Ukraine has a tectonical change in the self-idea of European integration, and how huge this change was, we will just see in nearest future, and we will have an abilities to estimate it in the future. Now, the second block, what should we understand from the results of general elections in Serbia? First of all, we saw that Alexander Vučić, as a candidate for the post of president, won the elections even easier than he did it 5 years ago. At the same time, his party, Serbian Progressive Party, lost its weight. For me, let's say it's quite natural thing, which is completely okay for the societies with a huge personalization of political leaders, which Serbia is definitely which Serbia definitely is. Why? Because people who belong to such kind of societies, they normally identify all the victories with a strong leader, and all losers with his team, parliament, government, who were not been able to realize his ideas to the very end. From one side, from another side, the political structure of such systems is organized in a way to create such situation and such perception from people. This why I suppose that this result is completely okay. What is much more interesting, despite the fact that the results of parliamentary elections were more or less also very clear even before the race started, now we see that results showed us that Serbian political and party system will gradually transform in nearest future. It also will press the pro-president party, Progressive Party, to transform both its structure and program, and probably in the very nearest future, even during the formation of parliament coalitions, to have new and probably for Moscow unpredictable coalitions with liberal wing of their party who won these elections. Also, it led to the transformation of right bloc of the Serbian political scene. And I suppose that for the first time in last decade and a half political history of Serbia, they have a chance to create the joint platform and to formulate quite effective, let's say in absolutely normal terms, nationalist program, national patriotic program, and to find a support from Moscow in case if they be able to formate a clear leader, a leader who could be quite strong and quite effective in future circles, in future election circles in Serbia. Also, these elections showed us that liberal wing also should transform and will transform its discourse and its program. What did we see from all this pre-election race? That the level of pro-Russian and anti-European, which is more significant, sentiments in Serbia is much more higher than it was expected, both by Brussels and by, let's say, postmodernized part of Serbian society and Serbian Serbian society. It means that probably liberal wing will transform its discourse from the logic that Serbia should be a part of the Euro-Atlantics, European Union, and with the very, let's say, radical thoughts of the NATO itself, to the constatation of the situation that Serbia is already part of Euro-Atlantics in terms of values, and will transform its political discourse to the discourse which is characterized, which is general in the European Union itself. And first of all, of course, let's say the most evident part of this discourse is the discourse of green projects and green politics, which is a new, let's say, attempt of the European Union to create ideology which belongs only to the European Union and which could be translated to other societies. What? And the third block, sanctions. Whether Serbia will introduce sanctions Russia, in my opinion. In my opinion, whatever is going on in Serbia, it will, Alexander Vučić, whatever he thinks himself, he will do his best in order to try to stay in the balance between the East and the West. And even the reasons are not, let's say, pro-Russian sentiments of Serbian people. The reason is not national interests of Serbia. The reason is the idea of multi-polar foreign policy of Serbia, which consists of two wings. On one hand, it's Brussels and Washington, which is clear, and on another wing, it's not only Russia, even not Russia to a great extent. It's a cooperation, it's a tandem of Russia, China, and to some extent the presence of Turkey and some countries of Gulf monarchies. That's why if we take from this Orient wing, from this East wing of multipolar Serbian policy Russia, it will narrow the sense of presence of China to some extent as well. That's why for him it's crucial to keep this balance, and in order to keep it, I am absolutely sure that he even ready to go in the parliament to find a compromise with Brussels and Washington, and to go in the parliament to the, let's say, recommendations which are done by Brussels last days. These recommendations are not to include in the coalition traditional partner of Serbian Progressive Party, Socialist Party, with Ivica Dačić, and not to give Ivica Dačić, due to his pro-Russian sentiments, any significant posts in future cabinet. I suppose that even he is ready for such compromises, because if we take into account where the less harm in the eyes of probably in the eyes of Serbian leader is to have, let's say, unpredictable coalition in parliament than to ruin the logic of multipolar foreign policy, which was the main tool of success of Serbia of the last decade. Also, even if Serbia will join some sanctions, I am absolutely sure that it will not join to the already adopted packages of sanctions, maybe at the exception of air cooperation, because if it does it, it also, in terms of Alexander Vučić positions and in terms of internal stability, it will tell that all, let's say, speeches, talks about national interests of Serbia are nothing in the face of the pressure which is done by the Brussels, which is done by Brussels and Washington on Serbia. And even finally, if it joins to further packages of sanctions to Russia, I am absolutely sure that if Moscow behaves itself accurate without any, let's say, angry steps towards Belgrade, we will have cooperation almost as it was before, because we had even more difficult periods in our joint history. For example, the period of 90s was much difficult for our relations than it is now. You remember that Moscow joined full package of Security Council of UN sanctions towards Yugoslavia. But contrary to that, the economic cooperation of 90s was going between Moscow and Belgrade in terms of semi-gray schemes, because Serbian companies who were on the list of sanctions, they could not operate, but all the rest they could operate. All over the world and in Russia, and at that time there were a lot of firms which was established in Russia, and to some extent it ensured the situation of pragmatic economic cooperation of the beginning of millennium, when the sanctions towards Yugoslavia were over from one side, and from another side, so-called democratic coalition came into power in Belgrade, and it was welcomed by Moscow as well. That's it. For me, I'm ready for discussion and questions.
Thank you very much. Well, yes, I think that we had a very interesting talk. And before we start with our Q&A section, I would like to remind our participants that they can ask questions by raising their hand or writing their questions in the chat section. We already have one question from Georgi Ivanov.
Yes, thank you very much for the lecture. It was very interesting for us. I would like to ask a question about the country Bosnia and Herzegovina. As we know, the UK imposed sanctions against Milorad Dodik, who is a member of the Presidium of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Earlier, some EU members considered the same possibility of sanctions, but Hungary opposed it. So my question is, why there is such an unfriendly attitude against this Bosnian leader, and what can the sanctions which are imposed actually lead to? Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Babic. Professor Entina, feel free to answer.
You see, everything that happens is the technology of the colonization of Balkans. You see the problem of Bosnia and Herzegovina. Myself, I am native from Herzegovina. You see, to undermine the Dayton agreements, to erase the autonomy of the Republic Srpska, and to impose the unitarist political system in Bosnia and Herzegovina, where Serbs and Croatians would become minorities in their own country, although they are autochthon people. You see, but all this and you see the other thing is that Republika Srpska, these are Serbs. And the Serbian people as a whole is under constant pressure from the West. Why? Because they consider that Serbs are a small Russia on Balkans. or protracted hand of Russia on Balkan, and the problem of the West, how to cut this hand. They dismembered the ethnic space of Serbs. You see, they want to separate Kosovo, to liquidate Republika Srpska, and also to subdue the Montenegro. This is the part of Serbian ethnic space. You see, in general, you see the Serbia as a state is under constant blackmailing. So that this is problem, you see, we are in the situation in which the mere existence looks like an incredible success. That's why.
Professor Entina, would you like to say something?
I agree with what Professor Babic said. What I would like to add, Georgi, first of all, that is not sanctions against Dodik is not the breaking news. Because if I'm not mistaken, Dodik is under the sanctions last 10 years, under the different sanctions. United States, of Great Britain, and so on. Also, we should not forget that Great Britain is playing its own national role. From one side, it is playing in the Balkans as all over the world together in a tandem with United States. From another state, from another side of view, London has always always had its own national interests in the Balkans and its own national program. It's a traditional. If we speak in international relations theory terms, it's a traditional player on the ground from one side. Why I do not like Dodik? I will just introduce you one example because general frames was said by Professor Babic. When Dodik won the elections for the first time in 2006, he was successful in organizing a scheme which abolished the police reform in Bosnia and Herzegovina. Police reform in Bosnia and Herzegovina in its term was one of the main steps towards the centralization of Bosnia and Herzegovina, which was the main idea already after the conclusion of Dayton peace agreements. That's why from the very beginning he, let's say, was very not good guy for them from one side, despite the fact that when he was in the pre-election campaign and race, he, as it always been in the Balkans, was one of the hopes of the Western world for pragmatic, very predictable Balkan European, Balkan American cooperation. But he ruined the game from one side. And, now it's just another package. The whole situation in Bosnia and Herzegovina is very, very, very difficult at the moment because we see the factual dissolution of Dayton peace system of management of the country. If you know about sanctions against Dodik, you probably also know about that Federation of Bosnia and Herzegovina, the part of which belongs to Bosniaks and Croats generally. They firstly introduced the resolution which anti-Russian resolution in Presidium without the presence of Dodik, and this resolution was adopted by the European Union, which is a direct disruption of the Dayton peace system of management, because all the decisions on the level of presidium could be delivered only by consensus.
Yes.
And the same was done now in the United Nations when Bosnian representative voted for exclusion of Russia from the Council for Human Rights of the United Nations without the necessary decision from the Presidium. It means that they just in a factual manner change their order, which keeps the peace in Bosnia and Herzegovina for last 27 years. And that is the main problem at the moment.
Thank you very much. I even remember you had an interview about Bosnia for Bulgarian National Radio. Now we have a question from Martin Stoilov.
Hello, so I would like to lead the topic towards another Balkan neighbor, Albania. So what is the attitude of Serbia and the Serbs towards Albania after so many years after the war? Can we say that we are facing the building of bridges between Belgrade and Tirana, along with Vučić's initiative for a Balkan Schengen?
Thank you very much for this question. You see, never Serbs were anti-Albanians. You see, our tradition with Albanians was so good that in the crown of the great Serbian ruler, Tsar Dušan, were inscripted, Tsar of Greeks, Arnauts and Serbs. The Serbs were not put in the first place because you see in this time, the nation does not exist. This was the produce of the French Revolution. They all were Christians, and there is no this jingoism or chauvinism among these people. And you see, the Albanians and Serbs were traditionally in very good relations. The Albanians' merits that they saved more Serbian monasteries and church in Kosovo because the chief Albanian tribes. And we do gratitude to them to save many, because Turks destroyed many one, but Albanians that received Islam had a, how to say, possibility to manage to save this. And when this begins, this is so Prizren League that Austria-Hungary was this devil that pushed the Serbs and Albanians against each other. You know that Austria is the first and unique country in Europe. This was based on religion. Austrians did not want to enter the German unification because they are Catholics and the others, the majority would be Protestants. And Austria-Hungary in Balkans, especially occupying Bosnia and Herzegovina, decreed that Catholics are Croatians, Orthodox are Serbians, and Muslims are Bosnians. They introduced them. Austria was hunting the Catholics from Slovenia to Ukraine, and she imported 100,000 of Catholics to change the ethnic structure of Bosnia and Herzegovina because Serbs had absolute majority. And then they wanted to create it, how to say this, line to divide Serbia and Montenegro in forming their military base in the Raška Oblast or Sandžak, and then to lead to Albanian population in Kosovo. The Austria was this that began this conflict between Serbs and Albanians. And you see, many our tourists go to Albania with best souvenirs, and in Albania they are not anti-Serbian. This is not the you see that what is unhappy relations in Kosovo are the result of foreign interference. And I am sure that in normal external environment, all contentions in Balkan could be resolved peacefully.
That's so
And you
interesting.
see, as you consider myself, I consider that ideal community would be the whole Balkan, and that could be the model of Switzerland. Namely, in Switzerland, you have 4 ethnic groups: Germans, French, Italian, and Romansh. And these people, Romansh, had only 72,000, but their language is not protected by as minority, but included in the Constitution of Switzerland as one of 4 federal languages. This would be Switzerland for me is the model to organize Balkanians.
May I add? I would look to this question because cultural question, yeah, cultural, historical, and so on, they are quite clear. I agree with what Professor Babic said. I would look to this question purely from the economic point of view in terms of Belgrade logics. Also the project about which Professor Babic was speaking about, Open Balkans. It's a project of first of all, Serbian and Albanian cooperation. Now let's ask us why. Yeah, and the answer for me is quite evident. From one side, of course, it ensures sub-regional cooperation, which is crucially necessary for internal development of sub-region. But from another space, Serbia was developing last decade quite rapidly. In comparison with its neighbors and in comparison with middle average in Europe. And it needs new markets. It cannot enter the European Union market with the whole, let's say, range of beneficial tools. But if we remember the history of socialist Yugoslavia, we remember that it was one of the initiators of non-alignment movement, and it was widespread to the whole extent, to a great extent, to the Northern Africa and Middle East countries. To have now economic cooperation with them wasn't be a bad idea for Belgrade. It's a huge, developing and quite empty market, also in terms of agricultural production, which is quite developed in Serbia. Now let's look for Geo Economics. In order to deliver any goods to Africa or Middle East, Serbia needs exit to the sea. The nearest exits after the dissolution of Serbia and Montenegro, the nearest exit and the close exit, either Port Pirei in Greece or Albanian Port Duras.
Yeah.
For me, that could be an element of pure economic logic. And it's absolutely okay, absolutely agree with Professor Babic that there is no fundamental Serbian-Albanian conflict or the absence of will to cooperate. It's a myth which was elaborated by external forces.
Well, thank you very much. One more question from Beatrice Bineva.
Yes, thank you. I would first like to thank once again both professors for their very informative talks. My question is concerning the Serbian multi-polar foreign policy that Ekaterina spoke about. And my question sounds the following way. Does this multi-vector foreign policy of Serbia have a future without Vučić? And also, what really makes the Serbian president so popular in Serbia? Thank you.
Lucy, thank you very much. You see, I discovered 1968 in Paris, where I had a French fellowship in a high institution in France. This was the Banque Centrale de Pays Francophone. This is the nearest to presidency Palais de l'Élysée. This functionary explicitly said me, we consider Yugoslavia as an enemy state because under the aegis of the non-alignment, she organizes our former colonies against us. France will never pardon to Serbia this. You see, this is that all three ministers of foreign affairs of Serbia, Konstantin Popović, Marko Nikezić, and Mirko Tepavac, argued that Yugoslavia must be neutral as Switzerland and not non-aligned as our rulers that were descendants of Austria and Hungary, that without any traditional statehood. The Serbian ministers and Montenegrin had 100 years of the statehood tradition because they had the state from 9th century. They, this is now discovered, these secret protocols that are declassified. They warned that all foreign former colonial empires, you see, consider the movement of non-alignment against themselves, organize their former colonies against them, because they did not understand that former empires, colonial empires, lost the empires, but not lost the ambitions of imperial ambitions. But Great Britain today behaves as an empire, great empire, although without empire. And he is a devil that, how to say, threatened especially the relations with Bosnia and Herzegovina and Kosovo. You see, this Serbian Minister of Foreign Affairs understood in time that Yugoslavia had to be a second Switzerland. That he, because of this non-alignment, they understood what the non-alignment had, what consequences. And you see, even in Paris, I discovered one thing more. A functionary, or as I had the state fellowship of France, I had the access to important people. They had me. Yugoslavia is more dangerous for us than Soviet Union. I was surprised. You see, we convinced our people that Soviet system is not alternative to our capitalism because not democratic, but we could not convince our population that Yugoslav system is not democratic because the self-management is a capital democracy. And he is more dangerous for capitalism because even a party, Parti Socialiste, the Michel Rocard, Parti Socialiste Unifié, had in his program the self-management. So after returning from Paris, I was afraid, scared that non-enlargement is self-management good Yugoslavia has life. And I read at least 30 papers arguing that we have to emulate Switzerland. So a multilateral, multi-ethnic and multi-confessional state is not capable for world policy. They had to concentrate on their own problems as Switzerland is. And I label this Balkan paradigm. No, so this, I did write many papers on this. I was alone in Yugoslavia to argue the neutrality, but you see late I now had nothing that I was right. You see this, I could send you this paper maybe if you are interested in.
Okay, so we have one more question in the chat section from Alexander Petrov, and I'm going to read it. I will just ask you for a little bit more short answer. He agrees with your statement about the Serbs, they should stay together. What's your point of view? Is this possible to achieve in order of all those things that are happening now in Eastern Europe? And he would also like to hear your opinion on the topic of Macedonia, on Macedonian history, and all those issues with Bulgaria right now.
This question for whom?
You can answer, Professor Babic, yes.
The Macedonia and Bulgaria relations. You see, the Bulgaria stopped the relations of the negotiation of the access of Macedonia because of the language. The Bulgarians want that Macedonia recognizes that their language is not a language, but a dialect of Bulgarian language. And you see Macedonians in creating Yugoslavia were recognized as a separate nation with a separate language. The Macedonians are not ready to give up for this acquisition. But you see, frankly speaking, I believe that the problem is that Bulgaria, by her will, wants to preclude including Macedonia, because this is against the interests of Bulgaria, but somebody else is not interested to resolve the relations between Bulgaria and Macedonia. But you see, is it logical if Macedonia enters the European Union, the frontiers between Bulgaria and Macedonia will be out because they disappear. And the circulation of people will, how to say, get useless, these differences, Macedonia and Bulgaria, also Macedonia and Serbia. There is no problem. So all, you see, problems of Balkanians people are the foreign interference, these geopolitical games.
Thank you very much, Professor Entina. Do you want to add something?
No, thanks. I suppose that it's to.
Okay, then. So I think our discussion came to an end, and it was a great pleasure to host you and talk about our favorite topic. I want to thank especially to Professor Babic and Professor Entina for joining us. And we really hope that this is not going to be our last discussion on this topic. And I also remind you that the opinions you heard belong to those who said them, not to the club, faculty, or our university. Thank you all for the participation. Thank you all for your questions, and we hope to see you soon on our next seminar. Bye-bye and stay safe.
Bye.